Were they gold or were they fool's gold? You decide next on Polygamy. What love is this?
She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith, all of them, including plural marriage, especially plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age. But she fled. She ran away. She preferred an eternity of outer darkness to a life of polygamy. She chose hell over religious enslavement. That girl was me. After I fled, I thought I was free, but I realized I wasn't free. I was lost, alone, desolate. No home, no hope, no life. Then Jesus Christ found me and rescued me, and He loved me. In His love, I found real freedom, a real home, a real life. And Jesus offers you the very same thing. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. He has been a refuge for me, and He can be for you too. Knowing the surpassing love of Jesus Christ today, this is why I can look back and ask, polygamy, what love is this?
Welcome to our show tonight. This is Polygamy, What Love Is This? And I'm your host, Doris Hanson. And we are grateful that you've joined us tonight, and we hope that you enjoy what we have planned for you. You know, this is a telephone call-in show, and it means that after our discussion, after we are done talking with what we're talking, we're going to open our phone lines and invite you to call in and either ask questions or make comments according to the topic of our discussion. And our topic tonight is Joseph Smith and those plates of gold. And before we begin our discussion, I'd like to remind our viewers of our disclaimer. Our viewers need to know and keep in mind that Mormonism and Mormon polygamy was conceived by Joseph Smith. He contrived it, he practiced it, he prophesied it, he lied about it, and he was killed because of it. Today's polygamists are direct doctrinal descendants of their Joseph Smith's for salvation, polygamy for salvation doctrine. And because of that fact, everything or anything to do with Joseph Smith has a direct bearing on our show. So although we desire for the mainline Mormons to watch our show and to appreciate the information that we disseminate here, they do need to remember that our show is primarily to bring evidence to polygamists that God never commanded polygamy through Joseph Smith or through anyone else. And because Joseph Smith is a self-proclaimed prophet of God, we are obligated to take a look at his person, at his character, at his integrity, and the honesty of the claims that he made. Last year, we invited tonight's guest to discuss the various versions of Joseph Smith's first vision account, and you can watch that online at whatloveisthis.tv, and that was shown on February 2nd of 2012. And so tonight, to get started on our discussion, I would like to introduce our returning guest, author, radio show host, and friend, Bill McKeever. Thanks again for coming.
It's good to be with you, Doris. Thank you.
We've got a kind of an exciting presentation to show tonight, don't we?
We do.
But before we get started, would you tell our viewer, you're kind of involved with a lot of activity in this culture and outreaches and so on. So why don't you tell our viewers some of the things you're doing? You have a webpage and a radio show.
Yeah, I founded Mormonism Research Ministry back in 1979, and part of our outreach is to not only educate the body of Christ as to what Mormonism teaches and how to talk with our Mormon friends and loved ones, but also to try and reach out to the Mormon people through outreaches on the streets, whether it's at a Mormon pageant such as the Mormon Miracle Pageant or downtown. We have people that work with us at MRM that go downtown and talk to people on Temple Square, north of Temple Square. We also try to reach out to people through our website at mrm.org. We put out a lot of printed material people can download off the website, and plus the radio show Viewpoint on Mormonism has certainly been reaching a lot of people, not only here in the Salt Lake area, but because of the technology that we have nowadays, we have people that are listening to it all over the place.
And I've listened to that, and it's got a lot of good information
on
your radio show. And they can listen to your radio program where?
Here locally, they can catch it on 8:20 a.m. at 9:45 in the morning, and then it comes on again at 9:30 in the evening.
At 9:30 at night. A lot of good information there. And I'd also like to talk about a couple of your books. The first one, of course, I always bring this one up in their own words. It's my favorite book.
Oh, thank you.
And it's just full of good information, and you want to tell our viewers about that, what they can expect.
I mainly wrote that as a resource for people who were interested in wanting to know what Mormons had said about certain subjects. Not just Mormon leaders. Of course, we would say that those are the important people when they say something, especially if it's part of the First Presidency or the Quorum of the 12. Certainly a Mormon should take notice what the leaders have said about these issues. But we also included Mormon apologists. We included even some Mormon lay people, not because we feel that they're authoritative, but to give the reader an idea of what Mormons believe about this.
And it goes clear back to what Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and some of the early Mormon leaders also said, and their publications.
What's good about this is because the quotations are all bunched up under each topic, you can either see a pattern where among Mormon leaders where they are agreeing on this, which tells you that this is pretty much an established understanding. But then again, you'll also notice there's a lot of contradictions.
You'll see the contradictions.
And
that's
so
what's great about it.
The question then becomes, well, if these men are really prophets of God, why is it that their God can't seem to get the information the same to all these men? You would think it would not change like that, but it does.
Right, and God doesn't change, so that's a good question. And then your latest book, Answering Mormons' Questions.
Yeah, that just came out a few months ago, and that was co-authored with Eric Johnson, who's worked with me for quite a while at MRM. I give him all the credit for all the bells and whistles in that book. He took what I did I first wrote that back in the 1980s, and so it's been over 30 years. And then I said, this thing really needs to be updated. It's been a long time since we've done anything with it, and so we ended up working together on. It's really a completely new book. Some of the questions are similar to what was in the old one, but a lot of the material is really up to date.
And it's a very good book. So
Thank you.
If anyone has questions about various parts of their faith, or if they're even investigating Mormonism, and polygamy, of course, is involved with this because they have the basic doctrinal beliefs as the Mormon Church does. So let's talk about those gold plates. Now, for the people maybe who are watching that are not familiar with the story of the gold plates and the importance that it is to everyone who perceives Joseph Smith as a prophet, what's the story of the gold plates?
Well, Joseph Smith claimed that he was visited by an angel who called himself Moroni, and it was this Moroni who, coming back as a resurrected being, told Smith about some plates that he had actually buried in the ground not far from where Smith lived at that time. And this was supposed to be an ancient record of ancient inhabitants and the source from whence they sprang. In other words, where did they come from? And Mormons, of course, believe that Joseph Smith eventually dug these plates up. He translated the plates from the Reformed Egyptian into English, and that is what we have now today in what's known as the Book of Mormon. Mormons naturally assume that because Joseph Smith was directed by God to find these plates and to translate these plates, that gives him credibility regarding his claim of being a true prophet of God. It's kind of a circular reasoning that I found many Mormons use. You'll ask them, well, how do you know Joseph Smith was a true prophet? Well, because he gave us the Book of Mormon. Well, how do you know the Book of Mormon's true? Well, because they were given to us by a prophet. That's not the best
That's
logic
not the way it
to use, but
works.
many Mormons that I've talked to actually do use that kind of a thinking method.
Yeah.
The problem is there are a lot of problem areas when it comes to the Book of Mormon. Not only do we have these plates that are supposedly made out of the metal gold, and most Mormons that I do ask about this, I'll ask them, I said, do you believe that the gold plates were really made out of the metal gold? About 99% of the time, the Mormon's going to say yes. Because that's what their leaders
what
have
we were
actually
taught,
said.
yeah.
Well, that's what the leaders have said, and that's what the angel actually said. When the angel appears to Joseph Smith, he said that they were written on gold plates.
That's what he said. That's right.
But Mormon apologists know that there's a problem with that.
So what have the Mormon leaders said about it?
As far as the plates being made of gold?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to interrupt.
Well,
your
they stick
train
to
of thought
that
there.
story.
Yeah.
They stick to that story, but it's the apologists that have kind of taken the front stage on this. And they know that if the plates were actually made of the metal gold, there's a couple of problems with that. One, the metal would be so soft it would be difficult to write on it, even though the Book of Mormon talks about the jaredite plates that were made of pure gold. But they also know that the weight of the gold would be so incredible that Joseph Smith could not have possibly had done what he did in finding the plates, getting them out of the ground, and then eventually taking them to his house about 3 miles away. According to the story that has been repeated numerous times and is actually in correlated manuals, the story is that Joseph Smith had to carry these plates for a distance of 3 miles to get to his house. And as he was going home with the plates, he takes them out of the ground, he tucks them under his arm after wrapping them in a linen frock. Now he's tucking them under his arm and he heads for home. On the way home, he is accosted by a man who is hiding behind a log who hits him in the back of the head with a gun. Okay. Now, Smith gets into a struggle with this gentleman. Well, I shouldn't say gentleman, but he gets into a scuffle with this man. And somehow he is able, with the plates, to knock this man down in such a way to where he's able to run away from this person who was trying to...
carrying those plates.
We have to assume, because if he was to have dropped them, they would have been ruined. See, a lot of Mormons don't realize just how soft gold is.
Yeah.
If you were to drop the gold plates and they hit, let's say, on a corner or on the side, it would crush. You wouldn't be able to turn the pages, and also you couldn't be able to read anything that was near those pages that were eventually damaged.
Yeah.
So we have to assume that Joseph Smith somehow knocks this person down in such a way where he's not able to get up right away, and then he actually runs at the top of his speed, and this is an account that his mother tells, which is included in Mormon manuals. He runs at the top of his speed, able to get away from this person, and then it happens again. He is accosted by another person who is hiding to try and steal the plates. Smith gets in a scuffle with him. He's able to somehow, I guess, knock him down also, and then once again run at the top of his speed away from this attacker. And then it happens a third time.
My goodness.
3 times he
out of
is
breath,
accosted. Oh, imagine.
How old was he supposedly at this
Well,
time?
at this time, you have to remember, this is 1827, so he's a young man in his early 20s. He's just not a young kid anymore.
Yeah.
And so Smith is supposedly doing these incredible feats, all with these plates, somehow either under his arm or even if they were in front of him, trying to get away from these people who are bent on attacking them. Now, the whole story, to me, always sounded suspicious.
Well, I have a question. How the ruffians even knew that he was out getting plates? Did he brag it around town? Did he publish something in the paper?
Oh, everybody knew about the plates.
That before he picked them up,
Yeah.
before he dug them up, they knew that he was going to
How
get them.
exactly, we're not told, but
That's
everybody
kinda
knew
stupid.
about the plates because that's why Joseph Smith was persecuted in the early years. Now, Smith said he was persecuted for having a visitation by God the Father and Jesus. That's not true. You won't find anywhere in the early years of the church that he was ever persecuted for that. That story doesn't even come about till way later. But he was being criticized for this alleged visitation by this angel who would come to him. And no doubt the word was getting around about this. Now, but you raise a good point, because Smith said that when he gets the plates, he decides to get off the main road. how would anybody know that he was going to get off the main road? And why are these three attackers waiting off the main road? You would think if the normal route was the main road, they would have been hiding there. But they're not. They're off somewhere else. There's a lot of very suspicious ingredients in this story.
Yeah, like some of the other stories, that's right. So, do you think when Joseph Smith told this story, and we're going to get into the weight of the gold in a minute, but when he told, do you think he really understood the weight of gold when he came up with this story?
I don't. I really don't. He came from a poor family. They may have seen gold coins at some time, but I don't think they had any idea just how heavy gold would have weighed. Especially in the form that Joseph Smith describes. Because one of the things that I often hear from Latter-day Saints is, well, you have to understand that these were not machined in a way that they would have been perfectly flat, like the pictures that we often see, that they would have had a little wrinkle to it. And that's probably true. The problem, of course, for that argument is that gold is very soft. It's very dense, but it's very soft. Well, if you start stacking these plates on top of each other, as soft as they are, at least towards the bottom, they would be flattening out.
Yeah, they would.
Maybe not the very top, but certainly the bottom portion. And that becomes a real problem for Mormons who want to believe this story, because they will say, well, it wasn't like a solid block of gold. Well, technically, if they were really made of gold, like Joseph Smith said, or the angel said, then we have to assume, well, yeah, it kind of would have been like a block of gold.
Well, and he described them as being gold, as gold plates.
Well, yeah, but Smith comes around and he says, well, they had the appearance of gold. I hear this a lot from Latter-day Saints. They'll say, well, it just had the appearance of gold. And I says, well, does gold have the appearance of gold? I mean, I don't understand how that argument really works when the angel himself said that the plates were made of gold.
Yeah.
You would think Moroni would know what the content was. He was there, I'm assuming, when they were made. So you would think he would have known what they were made of. But again, it goes back to this problem for the Latter-day Saint apologists. They know the plates would have been too heavy, so they have to get the weight of the plates down to a manageable level, which right there tells you they don't believe there was any type of supernatural element involved to help Joseph Smith carry these plates.
Well, if that would make sense, or they wouldn't go to so much trouble to try and get their weight down.
Yeah.
And a common response, of course, from believers in Joseph Smith, they gave Joseph Smith supernatural strength to carry the plates, and we know that God can do that. We know
Certainly.
He can give.
I get asked that question a lot.
If that happened, why did they go to such great lengths to bring the weight down? And if God really did intervene, then why have they hunted for these possibilities? And I want to bring up Samson right here in the Bible, because God did give Samson great strength to do what he needed to do. And I have some quotes that I want to give our viewers from the Bible, that each time that Samson needed to use his great strength, God got the glory. But not one time in Joseph Smith's story does he ever say God gave him great strength. And the first one is in Judges 14:6, verse 6, where it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, that's Samson, in power, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. Verse 19, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of their men. And then Judges 15:14, the Philistines came toward him shouting, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. So God is getting the glory. God is getting the recognition for giving him power. Not once does Joseph Smith do that.
And I think that's a great point. I think it needs to be emphasized that if it certainly was a miracle that was involved here, it would have to include not only Joseph Smith, it would have had to include Moroni, who had to carry those plates first.
Yeah, why didn't he carry them for him, by the way?
And then we also have Emma, because Mormon historians have admitted that Emma talked about the plates and how she had to move the plates on the table in the Smith home. They were always covered up, but she actually moved them around in order to do her work, is what Richard Bushman says in his book, Rough Stone Rolling. So you have them, Emma, you have Moroni, you have the 8 witnesses who claim that they hefted the plates. Now they probably could have lifted them. If they were really gold, I tend to doubt it. If anybody has ever been to the Utah Lighthouse bookstore, Sander has a set of lead plates. And lead is probably the more comparable metal to gold, but lead is even lighter than gold. And I volunteer there on Saturdays when I'm in town, and it's interesting because people want to lift Sandra's plates. Her plates weigh 118 pounds. Most of the time when people go to lift the plates, they don't move. They don't move. And I've been asked more than once, are they bolted down? No, they're not. You can move them, but I can guarantee you, you're not going to carry them very far.
Right.
And what's interesting about the weight of 118 pounds is that John Witzel, a Mormon apostle, he actually said, according to his estimation, if the plates were the size that Joseph Smith gave, and it had a 10% air gap in between each plate, the plates would have probably weighed about 117 pounds. An easy weight, he said, for someone like Joseph Smith to carry.
And beat up 3 people and run 3 miles.
Obviously, John Witzel never tested out that theory because it's not an easy weight at all. It's not at all. And unfortunately, a lot of Mormons have not really thought through this story. They just naturally assume by the pictures that they see in the faith-promoting literature about Joseph Smith retrieving the plates from the angel with his outstretched arms. He's not going to do that. There's no way. There's an account, I think it was Martin Harris, who said that when Joseph Smith finally got to his home after the 3-mile trek off the main road, that he gave the plates to his mother through the window. Well, she must have been quite the strong person to be able to do that, because it just wouldn't have happened that way. I think really the story is just incredible. Now, it's not that I don't believe that Joseph Smith didn't have something. Remember, they were always covered up. He could have had just about anything underneath whatever he was using to cover it up at different times. But the point that he's allowing people to think he has something that he doesn't really have is problematic for me, especially when I think about his wife. Because I've often asked Mormons, I said, don't you think that a man that will lie to his wife will lie to anybody? I mean, Emma never peeked, which is amazing willpower, if you ask me.
Well, if he threatened, damnation from God, or, lightning bolt from heaven or something, that he did that with polygamy,
well, as far as we know, she never peeked, although she does make an interesting statement at one time. It's recorded that at one time when the plates were in the home, that she took her fingers and ran them across the edge, and they made a metal sound, a metallic sound. Well, that right there will tell you then the plates could not have been made of gold, because gold does not make a metallic sound. In fact, even the lead plates, if you lift up one of the plates and let it go, it makes a thumping sound, but it's not a metallic sound, not like sheets of tin, which is interesting, the comparison that Joseph Smith makes. He says that the plates were about the thickness of common tin.
So he probably did not know much about the properties of gold when he came up with the story for various reasons. So what's the discussion on the weight? What is the difference, first of all, in gold plates and golden plates?
Yeah, well, they've been using this argument. I think it was last year. They came out with, or maybe it was 2011. It may have been 2011. I can't remember the date exactly, but they came out with an Ensign magazine, and they were talking about the Book of Mormon, and they were talking about the plates. And one thing that Eric and I noticed was when they were talking about the makeup of the plates, they were using the word golden over and over and over again, and we thought, boy, they're using this a lot. This isn't just a few times. It was many times. They kept saying golden. Now, I've noticed in a recent issue of the Ensign, they went back to gold. So obviously someone's not getting the memo down at church headquarters when they're writing up these articles in the Ensign, because they need to make up their mind. What do they want the people to believe? That they were golden, meaning that was only the color? Or are they trying to get across to the people that the plates were actually made of gold? Because if it's merely color, there's a lot of Mormons that aren't catching that. They are still believing that it's actual metal. And Mormon leaders keep saying that. I'm not hearing the leadership in General Conference emphasizing golden, meaning merely the color. When you go back and you look at conference messages, you hear them using the word gold over and over again. So it's understandable that the people would take that and, pardon the pun, but run with it, okay? But that's what they're doing, because I do ask them that. I often ask them that.
So what the apologists that have tried to bring the weight down, they've got what you call the tombaga theory.
The tombaga theory was started really, I think, with a guy by the name of Reed Putnam, who was a Mormon metallurgist, and this was printed back in the Improvement era years and years ago, which was a Mormon magazine at the time. And the tombaga theory caught on with the Mormon apologists because Putnam came up with this theory that the plates coming from Central America, now you have to remember, if you're going to go with the tombaga theory, you cannot believe in what's known as the heartland model for the Book of Mormon lands. A person like Rod Meldrum or a person like Glenn Beck could not use the tombaga theory because tombaga is a Central American alloy. People who hold to that usually do not believe that the Book of Mormon lands were up in the United States area, but were in a limited area down in Central America. That's why it's known as the limited geography theory. And so this theory says that the plates were not made of pure gold because they know that would be a problem. So they say that the plates were really an alloy, probably mostly copper and gold. Now you have to have gold in there because even copper by itself, being buried in that harsh environment as it supposedly was up in New York, over all the years that it would be in the ground, eventually the copper would start to decompose. It doesn't last forever. Gold is the one metal that seems to last for a very, very long time. Even Reed Putnam admitted that there had to be a substantial amount of gold in the alloy, otherwise the copper and the gold would form electrolysis and it would start to self-destruct. So he estimated that it had to be at least 1/3 gold and the rest would be copper. Well, once you start putting gold back into the equation, you start adding on the weight. Now, true, you get more of a tensile strength to the metal, but you need that gold in there for it to have that long-lasting, you know, to last that long. And so here's where they start getting into these really strange hypotheses. For instance, John Witzow, as I mentioned earlier, believed that the plates could have had a 10% air gap in between each plate. And that with a 10% air gap, he estimated that the plates would have weighed about 117 pounds. Well, Putnam, he says, we have to put a 50% air gap in between each plate. And by giving it a 50% air gap, and let's say it was only about 30% gold, then we could get the weight down to 53 pounds. Folks, 53 pounds is still too heavy. I have a set of plates that are merely 53 pounds, but they're made out of sheet metal and they're only 4 inches high. The size that Joseph Smith gives us were, of course, 6 inches high, 8 inches long, and 6 inches wide. That was the dimensions that Joseph Smith gave. And taking Joseph Smith's measurements, I made my own set of plates out of sheet metal because I can't afford gold for obvious reasons, and can't afford the bodyguards either. But I made some out of sheet metal. Now, sheet metal is much lighter than gold or lead. But even then, the plates still weigh about 80 pounds.
Wow, and you brought those plates with you tonight.
I do have them. I have them here, and are we going to have someone come?
Yeah, let's let our viewers see what your plates look like.
Okay, well, what we have here, if you want to see what they look like. Now, you'll notice that these plates look very similar to the pictures that you see in Mormon magazines and Mormon manuals.
And are they the same size that Joseph Smith claimed they were?
6 inches wide, 6 inches deep, 8 inches long. Now, I couldn't put the loops in here because it just would have been too hard to make. So I just put a bolt through them and a little cap nut on the top. But this is the same size. Now, a Mormon would argue, but see how flat your plates are. Well, yeah, they are. And they would say, well, ours would be wrinkled. Now, you want to be careful about that because if you want to use the argument that we have 50% air gap in between the plates, remember, Smith only supposedly translated the top 2 inches. If you start putting a 50% air gap in between these plates, you're getting rid of plates that have that much needed space for the text to give us the Book of Mormon. The original 1830 edition Book of Mormon was about 580 pages long. That's paper. And even the paper pages is about 1.25 inches thick. He does this on 2 inches of metal plates that had to be engraven.
Yeah.
So the story really gets to be
It's
far-fetched
wild,
very
yeah,
quickly.
Very wild. So can you just pick those up, and can someone come and pick these up and see if our
Do we have a buff
viewers-
farm boy? That's what
a
I
buff
always
farm
hear.
boy that will
A
come
buff farm
and
girl.
prove
So-
that you can pick them up and run with them.
I can like slide.
They are heavy.
Yeah.
They are very heavy. And if somebody wants to kind of get an idea of what we are talking about, go take the battery out of your car and just hold it for a while. It's about this size. A lot of batteries are about this size. And you'll notice how quick that weight becomes very heavy. And yet we're supposed to assume that Joseph Smith was able to outrun 3 attackers, 3 different occasions during the time from when he retrieved the plates.
Could you run with those very far?
No. No way.
No,
I can't even
a
move 'em.
lot of Mormons can't. And you know what's amazing? When I have Latter-day Saints lift these plates, it becomes very apparent there's something wrong.
There's something wrong.
And I'll tell you, this is one of the best illustrations that I have found in trying to get the idea across to Latter-day Saints that this story is not worth believing.
Yeah,
It's not worth believing.
It definitely is not. With too many things. Thanks for trying to
Thank
lift
you.
those. Hope you didn't hurt your back or anything.
Yeah. No.
But think about it too. If Smith did not have the plates that he claimed to have, what does that say about his calling as a true prophet of God?
Well, true. And if you can't believe what he said about the plates, how can you believe what he said were written on the plates? And I would
Exactly.
say this to polygamists: if you can't believe this, how can you believe what he said about polygamy or anything else? For that matter?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a very important argument that a Mormon must hold on to, and it's amazing how many excuses that I will often hear from Latter-day Saints. And there's times when I've said to Latter-day Saints, do you hear yourself? Do you listen to what you're saying? Look at what you have to do to defend Joseph Smith's story. And they will come up with all sorts of excuses. And what I have to keep reminding the Mormons that I'm talking to when I'm using this demonstration out on the streets is that, notice I'm sticking to the story as it's actually written in your sources.
Exactly.
You are having to invent all sorts of information to try and make this story work. Every one of these excuses, however, has a very simple rebuttal. But they know that once they get rid of the plates, the whole church
gone.
starts to fall apart.
It's
They
gone.
know this.
Yeah.
Mormon leaders have said as much.
Yeah.
It's the same with the first vision. You get rid of those 2 elements, Mormonism collapses. So they have to do whatever they can to protect this story. And it's not worth protecting.
I've heard people say, faithful believers in Joseph Smith, ask, well, what does all this matter? What difference does it make what the plates were made of? Does that make what was written on them and what he translated less meaningful?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said. If we find that he lied about the metal of the plates and he lied about having these gold plates, then obviously what he says was on the plates becomes suspect. We can't trust him any longer. And the fact that he is going around with these plates being covered up, I think tells us a lot. Why can't you just show them that? And I'll have Mormons say, well, yeah, but what about the witnesses? They say they saw the plates. I go, really? Who told you that they saw the plates?
We can talk about that after
Okay,
the break
all right,
on the witnesses, because we definitely need to talk about that. But we see pictures of Joseph Smith translating from the plate, and of course these are Mormon church pictures and all that, but he actually didn't even translate from the plates anyway. It was with his hat. That
No,
he was doing the
you will find that Martin Harris, David Whitmer, his wife Emma Smith, his brother William Smith, they all say that when Joseph Smith was translating the plates, that he used a seer stone, a rock that he found while digging a well with his brother Hiram, and he would put the rock into a hat, and he would draw the hat closely to his face to exclude the light, and as David Whitmer said, and in the darkness the spiritual light would shine, something resembling parchment would appear, and on that appeared the writing. Smith would read the characters off to his scribe, and when it was read back correctly, it would go on to the next set of characters. Well, right there we have no margin for error.
Right.
They have to be read back correctly before they go on to the next set of characters. But the question I ask Mormons, have you ever heard this story? Some of them have. I say, okay, well, if you've heard the story and if you believe that's how it was done, where are the plates in this story?
Yeah.
He's not looking at the plates. Why would God put Joseph Smith through such potential peril to get the plates, have people attacking him to get them home, and then he doesn't even need the plates in order to translate from them?
The Book of Mormon, exactly. A lot of questions, too many questions. Well, it's time to open up our lines for the telephone for phone calls from our viewers. And our telephone number is 801-973-TV20, 801-973-8820. Give us a call. If you don't agree with what our discussion points have been tonight, give us a call and let's talk about it. Of course, we do require that you allow a two-way conversation when you call in, and please turn your television volume down. And while we're waiting for the calls to come in, we do want to share our message with you.
You are watching Polygamy, What Love Is This? Broadcasting live from Salt Lake City, Utah. This program is the broadcast outreach of a Shield and Refuge ministry. Shield and Refuge is a point of first contact for Mormon fundamentalists who question the doctrines of the religion or who are actively seeking for an opportunity to escape the polygamist lifestyle. Examining the claims of fundamentalist doctrine against the backdrop of biblical truth is central to our efforts. We invite you to contact us. Call toll-free at 877-425-9993 or email us at tv@aboutpolygamy.com. We want you to know that we've made available to you some outstanding resources free of charge. You will find them at our website, www.whatloveisthis.tv. There you will find the DVD, Lifting the Veil of Polygamy, which documents the real-life stories told firsthand of those who were lifted out of the culture of polygamy through the power and love of Jesus Christ. Also, free of charge to you is the booklet, Is Polygamy Biblical? It explores plural marriage in the context of God's Word and answers questions like, did God ever command polygamy? Is it part of God's plan? While you are at our website, make sure to take advantage of the archived episodes of this program, which can stream on demand directly to your computer. There are more than 100 shows to choose from. And if someone you know is unable to view this program via live broadcast, recommend that they visit this same website every Thursday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time to watch this show through live streaming video. Simply follow the links to the live streaming video page. If you are watching live tonight, we invite you to call us as we open our phone lines. The number is 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. Now, back to Polygamy, What Love Is This? With our host, Doris Hanson.
Welcome back to our program, Polygamy, What Love Is This? We've been discussing with Bill McKeever, our guest from Mormon Research Ministry, pardon me, the story of the gold plates that Joseph Smith claimed that the angel Moroni told him where to go dig them up, and he ran home with them and then translated the Book of Mormon from them. And we're inviting our viewers to call in and ask your questions or make your comments regarding our discussion topic tonight. We'd love to hear from you. 801-973-8820. You know, we're often asked by people who are defending Joseph Smith, how could a young and uneducated boy possibly have produced such a magnificent document as the Book of Mormon if he didn't get it from God? Well, actually, I think that it's obvious that the Book of Mormon author was either writing a fictional novel and he knew it, or he was an uneducated boy who thought he could write history and blew it. So, Bill, let's talk about the witnesses.
Okay.
Supposedly, there's 11?
There's 11. And of course, that is a very hard piece of evidence that many Latter-day Saints feel is very difficult to respond to. It's really not that difficult. We find that when we look at the documentary history of the church, and I happen to have volume 1 right here, which actually talks about the 3 witnesses. There were 3, and then there were 8 more that came about later on. When it comes to the 3 witnesses, now the 3 are the ones that actually are predicted. They're supposed to come and actually look at the plates. And we find, however, that when it came time for them to look at the plates, Joseph Smith is translating, and he ends up leaving where he was translating to go out into the woods with Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmer. first question, wait a minute, you're translating in the house. Why are you leaving the house where the plates supposedly are to go outside into the woods? But yet they go out into the woods and they're going to pray. They're going to pray in order to see the gold plates. Why do you need to pray to see tangible plates?
That's right.
I mean, you can see mine. I mean, you don't have to pray about that. There they are. I mean, there they are. Why? Because they actually exist.
Yeah.
But he tells these three that you have to pray. And as they pray, they have this manifestation of the angel who is holding the plates. Now, the problem is it doesn't happen right away. And one of the people involved, Martin Harris, feels that when they pray and nothing's happening, that it's because of him. So he decides to leave the group, and he goes a distance away. And then Joseph Smith prays with the other men, and then all of a sudden this angel appears with the plates. Later on, Joseph Smith claims that he goes over to find Martin Harris, and he prays with him there. And then the same manifestation took place. But here's what it says. It says, "We accordingly joined in prayer and ultimately obtained our desires, for before we had yet finished, the same vision was opened to our view. At least it was again opened to me." Because remember, Joseph Smith had already seen them with the other men. Well, now he's seeing them with Martin Harris. But notice it says, the same vision.
Yeah. So it doesn't say they're
What are they looking
tangible
at?
all.
No,
Yeah.
no, they don't. And here's the thing. Marvin Hill, who was a Mormon historian, he writes and he believes that just as the three saw the plates in vision, that was probably the same way that it happened with the 8. And there seems to be evidence to support
Yeah,
that.
there is.
So if they are only seeing them in vision, I don't think that's a very strong argument. And what I've often said to Mormons is I'll say, what if somebody had accused you of committing a crime? And when they got up on the stand, they said that they saw you do the crime, but they saw it in a vision. Would anybody take him seriously? Would any jury in their right mind convict you of that crime if the primary witness saw you do the crime in a vision?
Yeah, so why would we accept it in any other way?
Great question. I think that's fair. And I think
is fair.
Mormons need to understand why we are so skeptical about this story. See, we don't come to the table with the presupposition already that Joseph Smith is a prophet. I'm still in the testing stage for this guy. He has to prove himself to be a prophet before I'm going to go and believe what he says. But you see, sadly, a lot of Mormons have already taken that leap. And this clouds their thinking, sadly. We need to be patient with Mormons who are thinking this way, but at the same time, I think we need to be firm with the evidence that we present.
The evidence has to be presented. We are supposed to test it all. Well, we do have some callers here waiting, so let's take a leap on this one. We have line 1, James calling from North Ogden. Hello, James.
Good evening, Doris.
Yes.
I was curious, the Book of Mormon was written in Reformed Egyptian. Is there anybody that knows about this language? I mean, to my knowledge, there's no Egyptologist or Egyptian historian or anything that admits to any documentation or even this language existing other than what Joseph Smith said. I'll get off the air and let you toss it around, and I'll listen to what your response is on.
Okay.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, James. Okay.
I know of no Egyptologist who knows of Reformed Egyptian. I've heard Mormon apologists try to do some incredible gymnastics with the English language on this, but you have to also know that some of the characters that were on the plates were actually copied down. So we do have some of the characters of what this Reformed Egyptian supposedly looked like. Nobody that I know of can translate this. Nobody has ever seen this. In fact, if you look at the letters very carefully, it looks like something that a child would do. I'm sorry, I know that sounds harsh if you're a Latter-day Saint, but really, it looks like something a child would do. Letters like being backwards or upside down, sideways, whatever. And this is supposed to be an actual language that nobody's ever heard of before.
And it just goes along with everything else that has to do with this story and with the Book of Mormon itself. There's just no evidence for anything that has to do with it at all. And this is just another piece of non-evidence.
No, yeah, absolutely. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous. Okay, so the answer to the question is no linguist in the world knows anything about Reformed Egyptian. All right, line 2, John calling Salt Lake City. Hello, John. John, you must turn down the volume of your TV. We'll go on to the next caller if you don't do that. Hello, John?
Yes.
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. Yes, am I on the air?
You're on the air, John. What's your question?
Hey, I have a question. I've heard that, there's several different stories about what age he was when he found the plates, that he was 16 and then 17 and 18 and at different ages, and that the original story that he came out with, the age that he was when he said that he first had the vision and he went and saw the plate for the first time, I guess, before he even got the plates out of the ground. They'd done a survey, with the government survey of the roads in those days. The time that he said that he actually first went up and saw the place, and there wasn't even a road to that area yet, or so there couldn't even have been no cabin yet. The cabin wasn't built until a couple of years later. Is that true?
I've heard that story before. I have not studied it enough to give you an opinion on that. One thing we do know, though, John, is that Smith was born in December of 1805. He's not allowed to retrieve the plates until 1827, so we can just do some simple math and we get a pretty good understanding of how old he would have been at that time. And like I said, he was a young man in his early 20s. He certainly was not to be thought of as a naive young teenager at that time, because that certainly couldn't have been the case. He could have very easily developed this whole story, and the idea that or I should say the theme that we find on the gold plates, supposedly, that became the Book of Mormon, was really not all that original anyway. The idea of people coming across the ocean and settling on this continent was not all that original with the Book of Mormon. There were other authors that had those kind of theories as well. So I wouldn't take that as strong evidence at all.
Well, it does seem awful hard for me to believe it, too, because he changed his story so many times. I've read about 5 different stories
And so many
about different people saying different things that he said about the original plates and what he said and what he saw and the angels and all of that. So if you can't believe that, what can you believe?
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate your call and your question.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, we have line 3, Brian calling from Salt Lake City. Hello, Brian. Brian? Sounded like he went away. Hello, Brian. Are you there? Well, he didn't want to answer. Okay, we have an interesting call coming in on line 1. Charles from Orem. He said he made Sandra's plates. Hello, Charles.
Yes, hello, Doris. Good evening to you.
Hello, how are you?
Enjoying your show very much this evening.
Thank you.
And your guest, Bill.
This must be Charles Larson.
I think it is.
Okay.
Hello?
Good to hear from you.
Yes. I have to say that you're discussing a subject that's very near and dear to my heart and is like a blast from the past. I'll share something with your guest. Back in about 1981, I am the fellow who actually made those lead plates that are in Sandra's store that he sees every week.
Oh.
Sandra told me that. You're notorious.
Yes, it's quite a hefty thing.
It is.
And I have to say, Doris, I really enjoyed the point that you made about the super strength, how Joseph Smith never gave credit to God for that. Something that I have often pointed out to Mormons who try to raise that issue is that isn't it peculiar that if God gave Joseph Smith super strength to handle these plates and he was so cavalier about it, why on earth didn't God give Joseph Smith super strength to lift the rock that was hiding them, and he had to get a lever to do that.
Good point.
Now that's a good point.
Touche. Yeah.
Oh, there are many good points on it. But anyway, wonderful discussion tonight, Bill. You do wonderful work. I'm very, very
Thank you, Charles.
pleased to see you on there tonight. And I'll let you guys go.
Thank
and
you.
Say hello to Sandra for me next time you
Do
see
that.
her, okay?
And
We'll do
thank
that.
you, Charles. Thanks for calling. And of course, Charles has been on our show before. He's been a guest on our show a couple of times. He's the one who wrote the book, Questioning the Book of Abraham, by his own hand upon papyrus, proving that, of course, the Book of Abraham also has been a false translation. Another story of Joseph Smith that we
Right,
just
the Book of
have to put
Breathings,
to the
right.
question, you know, of what was
Well, think
all
about it. If Joseph Smith got away with the Book of Mormon, why couldn't he get away with another one?
And he did, and he
he
did,
did.
and he did. Well, it looks like we might have Brian back on line 3. Let's see if we can get him to answer this time. Hello, Brian.
Yes.
You're on the air, Brian.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I am not LDS, never have been. But I was tuning into your show this evening and listening to you guys trying to disprove or deflate the Book of Mormon, you know, by saying that Joseph Smith, there's no way he could have carried these 160, 170-pound plates
200.
out of the mountains and at the same time, you know, fight off any attackers. My question for you is how is that bizarre story any different than the stories that you hear in the Bible, say as Jonah sitting in the belly of a whale, or David fighting off Goliath, or Moses speaking to God through a bush on fire, or the Ark? I mean, in my opinion, you guys are trying to deflate the Book of Mormon, whereas that exact same arguments could be made against the Bible.
Well, do you believe in a God at all, Brian?
You know what? I'm kind of on the fence with it.
Okay. Well, if there is a God, and we've talked about this earlier in the show when it comes to supernatural involvement by God, certainly there are miracles in the Bible, and if we believe in a God who's powerful enough to create the universe and mankind and everything that's in it, then obviously he's powerful enough to do things that are outside of what is natural. The difference, of course, between what you're talking about in the Bible is that we would recognize a lot of these things to be a supernatural event. We can't do that with the Book of Mormon story. It's just, that's not being allowed because of, as we've discussed, the way that Mormon apologists themselves have understood the plates could not be gold and things like that. So there's a difference between the two. And we're ready to recognize we do believe in miracles. I mean, that's one of the questions that Mormons often will say. They'll say to me, well, don't you believe that God could have parted the Red Sea through Moses? I say, absolutely, I believe that he could. That would be really nothing for the God that I believe in to accomplish. The problem, of course, is there's no miracle element in this story. The Mormon has to make that up in order to make the story work.
And also, the product, the end product of this story is the Book of Mormon, which he claims to be from God, and yet there's no evidence for the Book of Mormon. There's no historical evidence, no linguistical evidence, no biological evidence, no spiritual evidence. There are no evidence whatsoever for anything in the Book of Mormon, period. And so, but there is for the Bible. So we need to take it at that, you know, at what it represents for that.
The Bible talks about real people and real events.
I have one more thing. There are several people out there that could say that there's very little evidence in the Bible. Of course, if you believe it, then of course you're going to find evidence. If you don't believe in it, then you're going to question that evidence.
Well, are you talking about people like Bart Ehrman?
Sure.
Okay. Well, have you ever, Brian?
My point is, it does not. It seems as though you guys are arguing against the same issues that.
Okay. But Brian, let me respond to this, Brian.
Could argue with you guys about.
Okay, Brian, let me respond to this because we're running out of time. I get a lot of people, they'll bring up the arguments of Bart Ehrman, yet I will ask them, have you ever read a scholarly response to people like Bart Ehrman? The answer is usually no. Many very qualified scholars have responded to Ehrman's arguments and found them to not be as strong as most people think they are. So I think when we're going to raise an argument like that, let's at least acquaint ourselves with the rebuttals to those arguments before we naturally assume that a person like Bart Ehrman has the upper hand.
Yeah.
Because people like Daniel Wallace and other very competent scholars would very, very well argue that they don't have the strong arguments that people think.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Great. You have a good night, Brian. Thanks for calling.
And thank you for calling. And I've heard that before too. I'm sure you've heard it many, many times. That why can't these things have happened within the early Mormons? But not just this, but many other stories that they tell. Why can we believe they happen in the Bible if they and yet do not deny? But you know, the thing with the stories of Joseph Smith is none of them ring true. Mm-hmm. No matter how often we go through it and try to make it work, it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It becomes very problematic.
Yeah.
You have to really want Joseph Smith to be a true prophet to come up with some of these arguments that we hear.
To answer the questions. It's been said that we can't believe someone about this. If we can't believe someone about the small and unimportant things, why should we believe him about the important things? Mm-hmm. Either Joseph Smith was a prophet or he wasn't. There's no middle ground.
There's no middle ground.
There's no, sometimes he was and sometimes he wasn't. There's no excuse for his failures and for his deceitfulness.
Yeah, he sets the stage and he sets the bar way too high, and then he doesn't meet his own standard.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's true. Well, it's looks like that we're at the end of the show, Bill. Thanks.
Goes fast.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
again.
having me.
You've given some good information. I want to thank our viewers for watching. Did you know that the Bible says that there is only one faith, and that one faith was here long before Joseph Smith was here and continues long after Joseph Smith's been dead and buried? One faith which was once and for all given to us, and given only once because God promised that it would never be lost, and God keeps His promises. It was given once for all people, and it was given through the word of Christ and not through gold plates. These alleged gold plates, if they existed at all, are totally worthless when compared to the faith that God has once for all given. 1 Peter 1:7 tells us that our faith is of greater worth than pure gold. Gold perishes, but this true saving faith will never perish, and this faith is the only means that enables a sinner to enter into God's kingdom glory. This entrance into glory is available only because of the precious blood of Jesus Christ, which was shed on the cross for our sins. Faith in His blood is the only way to be acceptable into God's kingdom. It's the only way. Plates of gold have nothing to do with anything, because God gave His word thousands of years before Joseph Smith's gold plates, and when He gave His word, He promised that it would remain forever and would never fail. So plates of gold are irrelevant and they are worthless. But our faith is not irrelevant and not worthless. Saving faith is our ticket to heaven. We plead with our viewers not to cling to worthless ideas and stories and fine-sounding arguments. Instead, we seek God and His saving faith, which is priceless and is our only ticket into His eternal glory. Thanks for watching, and happy Valentine's Day. Good night.